Your phone calls continuing in the next hour. Jim, Ruben, Mike, Prop, Joe, Kevin, and others that are patiently holding. I appreciate you doing that. And I haven't gotten to it because there's been so much other news we've covered, but I am going to play a couple short clips from MSNBC where they're calling for Obama to be a dictator because a dictator can get stuff done. Man on a white horse. You know, give us Adolf Hitler. He'll fix Deutschland. You know, give us Lenin, he'll fix it. Give us Stalin, he'll fix it. We know how that ends, don't we? Yeah, all because of an oil spill. We got to give up all our rights, and don't worry, pay the government new taxes. That'll show BP. So I'm going to get into that and this MSNBC hit piece airing 3 times tonight and upwards of 20 times total. Because I talked to the MSNBC, they said it'll probably air 20 times. And MSNBC was completely deceptive, but what do I do? Chicken out and not go on Fox, not go on CNN, not go on MSNBC? I saw some people criticizing me even being interviewed for the piece, you know, as if I was bad. But I noticed those guys I've seen some of them go on, you know, MSNBC, CNN. I mean, what do you expect? Obviously, it's the enemy, but I'm not going to sit here and cower. I'll tell you this, though. I refuse to fly to be interviewed by Good Morning America, Fox News, CNN. They've all tried to fly me to New York. No, I won't. Some have tried to fly me to L.A. I will not do it because I've been in the car. They'll send a car to pick you up to make sure you get there on time here in Austin 5 or 6 times and had the person say, okay, it's off and drive me back to my house. Almost like they're just wasting my time on purpose. I'm done. All right, I'm digressing. I wanted to get Alex Newman on because he came on to detail evidence of the Mumbai attack being a government inside job, and now even more has come out mainstream news that he was a government agent. That was the headline in the Chicago papers. And he's also went to Copenhagen and worked on that story last year. He's got a new story at the newamerican.com, Fed manipulation in the crosshairs, where he just breaks down how they're rigging almost everything. I mean, talk about unfair advantages. Talk about a monopoly takeover. This is it. So we're going to be talking to him here in just one moment. First, I wanted to thank some of the sponsors that have made today's radio broadcast possible. One of them is Acola Blue. AcolaBlue.com. It's an atmospheric water generator. It grabs water right out of the atmosphere, basically clouds, humidity's everywhere, even if you can't see it. And then it purifies it through 7 to 12 filters, depending on which unit you buy. And they've got units that do 7.5 gallons a day, units that do 1,000 gallons a day. They've got them inexpensive, you know, for a family, right up to stuff that can support a whole Army battalion. So AcolaBlue.com, ECOLOBLUE.com. The best, cleanest, purest drinking water out there. AcolaBlue.com or 800-691-6043, 800-691-6043. And continuing, I want to tell you about Essential Survival. If you get hit by a disaster and are injured, are you going to wait around for FEMA to come and take care of you? Be empowered and get the Essential Oil Survival Kit from Essential Survival. Essential Survival therapeutic-grade essential oils are straight from Mother Nature's pharmacy, powerful, concentrated, portable, cost-effective, and they don't expire. Go to essentialsurvival.org/Infowars. That's www.essentialsurvival.org/Infowars to get a free ebook. And you'll learn how to use essential oils for cleansing and healing of wounds, stop bleeding, get rid of pain naturally, kill bacteria, viruses, and receive help with literally thousands of first aid and day-to-day concerns. My staff just loves these oils, and you will too. Essentialsurvival.org/Infowars. Against that, it's essentialsurvival.org. Essentialsurvival.org. Okay, going to our guest, Alex Newman of the New American. Alex, you've got the floor for the next 22 minutes we've got left in this hour. I appreciate you coming on short notice, but I saw your article dealing with the redistribution of wealth, and I know people understand the Fed's a fraud, but your article, speaking to the experts doing the research, really in just 10 pages or so, condenses it down, in easy-to-understand language, and it's so important to get this information out to everybody because this is how this illegitimate New World Order gets all its power, as you know. So walk us through this.
Well, thanks for having me on, Alex. And yeah, basically, it's what you said. It's this huge scheme. And so what I did with this story, I started by looking at basically real estate and the stock market. And I started noticing that the Fed was, printing trillions of dollars and giving it to their friends at the banks. And, a lot of this is well known now from testimony in Congress and stuff where he was admitting that they printed $500 billion and gave it to foreign central banks so they could give it to their banks. And so what they did was they saw the banking sector was collapsing, and so they printed tons and tons of money and just handed it out to their friends. And then when you start looking even deeper, you see that this gets even worse than what's on the surface already terrible. The Federal Reserve Bank of New York, you can even check this out on their website, actually, at newyorkfed.org. They have information about these front companies that they created. It was Maiden Lane 1, Maiden Lane 2, and Maiden Lane 3. They're LLCs, limited liability companies, incorporated in Delaware. And essentially what the Fed did was just printed money out of thin air, gave it to these companies, and the companies started buying up garbage from companies like AIG, companies like Bear Stearns. And what this did was it just basically put tons of money in the pockets of banks like Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan. So imagine investors. The way I came across this story in the first place was a guy called William Pitts. He's a developer and an investor down in Florida. And he started telling people that he had sold some of his stock in the big financial companies, and he had bought short positions on Citibank and Bank of America and these kinds of things. And he even bought some exchange-traded funds that would go up in value as real estate and the financials went down. And so instead of making a fortune, which would have been the natural consequence of properly reading the market, real estate was a huge mess, the banks were a mess. What happened was the Fed started bailing them all out without any authorization from Congress. Of course, the Constitution says Congress should allocate money. But what happened here was the Fed just started bailing out all these companies. And so investors who properly read the market, who saw what was going on, lost their money, and insiders made a fortune because they knew what was going to happen. They knew what actions the Fed was going to take. And then from there, you can look at basically any segment of the economy, and you see that it's being rigged by the Federal Reserve. For example, the precious metals market. A lot has come out in the last few months here, but even before that, we had Alan Greenspan. In 1998, he went to Congress and he told them that as the price of gold rises, the central bank is going to lease out increasing quantities. So basically, if the price of gold goes up, the Fed is going to keep it down by leasing out some of its gold supplies. And so that's good for the Fed. It's good for the banks, but it's obviously bad for the people. It's bad for the government. And then more recently, too, we had a Commodities Futures Trade Commission meeting, and there was some really explosive testimony there. I was a little bit upset that it didn't get more media coverage, but you had, for example, Andrew Maguire. He was a metals trader in London, and he came out and flat out said that the Federal Reserve was, through its agents, JP Morgan and so forth, stopping the rise in the prices of gold and silver, and that it was being insulated from any potential losses by the Fed and the taxpayer. So, again, we have this manipulation in the precious metals market. You have manipulations in stocks and bonds. And the ways that they're bailing out the banks, it's too many to count. You have the Fed giving the banks money, and then the commercial banks put the money back with the Fed, and the Fed pays them interest. You have the Fed with interest rates extremely low right now, obviously artificially. And then what the commercial banks are doing, they're taking this Fed money at virtually no interest, and they're buying U.S. Treasury securities with it. So the taxpayer is basically funding profits for the banks because a Treasury security, they have much higher interest rates than what the Fed is charging right now for commercial banks to borrow from them. So basically they're doing nothing, and they're getting a huge bailout from it's not even a bailout, it's just a theft. They're just taking money from taxpayers by doing nothing, by taking money from the Fed at almost no interest and just loaning it to the U.S. government and making a fortune off of the backs of people who pay their taxes. So it's just in so many ways the Fed is ripping off the American people. And then when you get past the market manipulations, the manipulation of stocks, bonds, gold, silver, all of these things, then you have the biggest manipulation of all manipulations. It's the manipulation of the money supply. With their control of the money supply, aside from being a debt trap, which I'll get to in just a moment, it creates the boom and bust cycle, and it allows their friends to get rich while Americans, get in debt. And, well, it's a permanent debt. It's a debt that we can't ever pay back, because when the Fed loans out money, you're stuck in a situation where you have to pay interest on that money, but they never created the interest. So I'm sure a lot of your listeners are familiar with